Hello and welcome to another edition of the TheMilVet Podcast. I am your host, Beau Higgins, and I have the true honor and privilege today to be joined by my dear friend Ari Fleischer to talk a little bit about his transitions in life and what he's doing these days. For those that may not be familiar with the TheMilVet is a company that provides an executive platform for veterans that are interested in getting into the private equity and venture capital space. If you're interested in that and opportunities, jobs in that space, I encourage you to check out themilvet.org, sign up to listen to our podcast. You can get on our newsletter distributions, listen about upcoming events where you can come meet us in person. We'd love to talk more. But today we are focused on the podcast and speaking with Ari. And Ari, welcome to the show. Great having you. Tell the
Thank you,
audience a little bit
Bo.
about what you're doing these days, man.
Well, I'm enjoying life. I'm out of the government. I spent 21 years in the federal government. I guess you could say we worked for the same company, a little different branch. 21 years in the government, and now I've been out for 22 years, 23 years, and I set up my own public relations company. So I run a PR firm is what I do.
Got it. And I think I really, as we talked a little bit about before the show, I mean, the folks we usually talk to and our guests we talk to are typically veterans, but, everyone goes through transitions in their lives. And yours is obviously, I'm sure, one that was challenging to leave the government space and get into the private space. We're just different. I mean, it's something that, can always be a little bit scary. But I want to go all the way kind of to the back. That how did you kind of know or get the desire or focus to get into the government space, into politics in general? Is
Yeah.
something just at an early stage in life? Did you have the bug, or what was all the impetus to kind of get this whole ball rolling?
I guess, Bo, I got into it by accident.
Yeah,
I had no intention, no idea that I would get into politics. I majored in political science at a very liberal arts college in Vermont called Middlebury College. And I liked studying politics. I was minor in French. So, I had no clue what I was going to do when I graduated. I'd applied to law school, applied to schools for foreign relations. And I moved home that summer after I graduated to play baseball in a baseball summer league. And a friend of mine from Middlebury had a brother who was managing a congressional race for a New York State assemblyman, a challenger against the long-term incumbent in the district where I live back in New York, where I grew up. And they needed a press secretary. And so they asked me, through this connection, do you want to come in and interview? I said, sure, I'll interview. So I interviewed for the job as press secretary on a congressional race, and they hired me, which tells you how little you need to know to become a press secretary. And then I got the bug. I loved it. I just loved politics, government, being at the intersection of policy and communications and campaigns and communications. We lost. And but since I had the bug, I made my decision. I said, no matter what, I'm moving to Washington when this thing's over because it seems fun. And I was unemployed, moved to Washington, and it took me a few months, but then I got my first job on Capitol Hill.
That's awesome. That's a great story. Again, I did not know that of the actual origin stories of it all. But it's interesting that it wasn't something that necessarily you had focused on in college. It almost happened by. I mean, I talk all the time. It's always about your network, how you get your job. So your network
Yeah.
helped you find a job, and you end up loving that profession. I joke around. I joined the Marine Corps thinking I would do 4 years, and I ended up doing 25. So I
Yeah.
get the fact that you come into service, whatever kind of service that can be, and it can hook you because you can make just an
Yeah.
impact. I think is the thing that certainly, whether it's as a military member or whether it's a member of the government somewhere else, you really have the ability to give back and make an impact. And I think you don't even sometimes appreciate that you're having making an impact until it's gone, and then you're like, man, something's missing from me being able to make that impact. It's just interesting to think about that,
Well,
for sure.
you,
Yeah,
you got to hope that you like what you do.
yeah,
I mean, if you
yeah,
don't like what you do and you're going to spend your next 20, 30 years doing it, that's not fun. So when you do click, when your career is what takes you for a long term, things are good because now it's not just drudgery. It's you're doing what you like and there's something about it that's fulfilling. And hopefully you can move your way up, do more, help more people, be successful. That's a career.
that's a career. No doubt about it. And I'm curious. I mean, is there? I think in the military we certainly know, okay, for this rank, you get promoted at this time, you do these things, you have this kind of a job. And if you want to go up the military ladder, it's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
My guess is it's not that way in
No.
politics. I mean, what is there a guide? Is it all just kind of who you know, timing, good luck? I mean, it feels like it always kind of feels like obviously you'll be on the winning side is helpful. It's a good thing. But I
Yeah.
mean, what was that process for you to navigate, which seems like chaos to an outsider. Maybe it's
Yeah.
chaos to an insider too. But how did you navigate that career progression and kind of figure out, okay, if I want to get to here, you got to do some of these things to get promoted, to get to that, to get to that.
Yeah. Well, you put it, in the military, there's a ladder, and it's a relatively straight ladder. It's got some curveballs to it, depending on who who's making decisions. But it's a ladder. I'd say in a government career, it's chutes and ladders. I mean, you never know when you're going to go up and then come plummeting down because your boss lost an election.
Yeah.
That happened to me once. The guy I was working for, a congressman from New York, early on in my career, lost his reelection. And so in my circles, when I worked on Capitol Hill. I worked for 3 congressmen and 1 senator in my career on Capitol Hill. And I also worked for the House Committee on Ways and Means. I worked for the National Republican Congressional Committee, the party arm that's in charge of congressional races. You zigzag, you move this way. Hopefully it's always a little bit up, but you hear about a job opportunity over in this office. You hear about a job opportunity in that office. So there's never one path because a congressman's office, for example, has about 18 staffers. A senator's office could have 30 if you're from a smaller state and maybe 80 or 90 people if you're from a bigger state. So, you think about that. I mean, that's a pretty small platoon, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so you can't really move up that much in a congressman's office. So if you're going to move up, you move around. And that's true about everybody who goes into Congress, campaign work, political work. But toward the end of my career, I had been on Capitol Hill for about 17 years, and I was kind of bored. And I got a job offer to become the communications director for Elizabeth Dole, who was running for president in 1999 against a number of Republicans in the primary, including George W. Bush. That was one of her opponents. So I'm working for Elizabeth Dole. She lost. That could have been it for me. My career could have been over in government. But George Bush asked me to move to Austin and become his press secretary on his campaign. So I moved to Texas. So you just never know where one job is going to end in disaster and you're out and you're done, or is it going to be the next ladder as opposed to a chute and you can hop around somewhere and move up.
It's interesting too because it's in the military. We have a detailer or a monitor that is tracking your career, right? Somebody at big headquarters is like, okay, Higgins, you've been there somewhere for 2 years. It's time to go do this next thing in the progression. Obviously, you don't have that. There's no one saying, all right, you've been with this congressman for 2 years. Yeah, you move up to the Senate office. You have to drive all of that yourself. That has to be, I mean, I know it's scary, but it's a lot less. I mean, it's just like, it's the Wild West. I feel like a lot more the Wild West of figuring this out. And I would assume that's why your network is so important, right? I mean, I talk about networking a lot to veterans that are getting out and trying to connect with their buddies from high school and college or whatever. But it has to be even more important when you don't have somebody watching out for you. You're doing it all yourself. So, I mean, your network is I say now your network is your net worth. But I mean, it's your network is what gets you those jobs, right? Is that fair to say?
That's a great statement. I hadn't heard that. Yeah, I mean, you have to be entrepreneurial. You've got to be resourceful. You've got to be clever, and you've got to be properly ambitious. You can't be so greedily ambitious that nobody wants you because it's so obvious, this guy's in it for himself. But you've got to have enough ambition in you that says, I'm not going to sit in this job for 5 years. I'm going to try to move up and move around. So it really is your network. And, when I worked for the National Republican Congressional Committee, I met so many people because there's such an extensive network of people in Washington who are involved in campaigns. And that helped tremendously. Now, the first campaign I worked on, that little assemblyman's race that I was telling you about, the campaign manager on the race was a guy named Tony Fabrizio. Tony is now Donald Trump's chief pollster. One of the top reporters who covered the race for the little local daily newspaper in Westchester County was a guy named Adam Nagurney. Adam went on to become the top political reporter for the New York Times.
Wow.
And the consultant was a guy named Arthur Finkelstein, who went on, he elected more people in the United States Senate than any other consultant in history. So right from my first campaign, I got lucky and I met some people who went somewhere, and I've always been friendly with these people. You just stay close, you stay friendly. And that's what you do in politics. That's what you do on Capitol Hill. It's a people business. It's social, and you better be that way.
I love it. I love it. Or wear funny jackets like I wear. That's it helps. You got to be memorable in some ways, right? No, I love that comment you made about being ambitious but not greedily ambitious. So you got to be a good dude. I think that's important, right? I mean, and I think it's like you said, you just never know where you're going to need that network at some point in time, and how other people that you've intersected with. So be a good dude, because 10 years later, 15 years later, who knows what that connection you may be able to, oh my gosh, it's crazy how that all kind of happens. But, being a good
my
dude,
daughter my daughter is a senior in college right now. So she's going through applying to get a full-time job when she graduates. And so I'm trying to teach her about networking.
Yep.
And, kids today, there's a lot of, well, if I didn't see the job posted on Indeed, they probably don't have a job. So why should I go call people? Why should I drop resumes off? Why should I? And I'm trying to explain, every conversation you have with everybody for an informational interview is an opportunity for somebody to like you and maybe remember you and help you later if they couldn't help you now. Every job that you get shot down for is an opportunity to come in second. Maybe you impressed somebody, and next time there's an opening, they'll remember you. Networking starts with your very first job, and networking is successful even if you're not successful immediately in getting a job because you met somebody else. And that's the name of the game. Just keep putting in your best foot, give it your best shot, be good at who you are and what you do, and you just never know where it's going to take you.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And again, I try to share similar to veterans. And it's interesting with veterans, they have this mentality a lot of times that networking is like a dirty word. Like, oh, it's like politics, or it's like somehow something that's, I'm like, what do you think you do all day in the military? You need to know the guy at the motor pool, and the guy at the chow hall, and the guy that's helping with your orders. Call it what you want. It's just, you get to know people and you maintain relationships, because you never know when they might need you or you need them. But somehow I do feel like veterans feel like, oh, outside the gates of the military, networking is some kind of, it's like some negative connotation. No, man, that's how life happens. You got to get beyond that and just talk to people. If people want to help,
but it's deeper.
You got to make the effort,
It's deeper, Beau. It's deeper than they may need you or you may need them. It's that when you meet people that you like and you admire and you have a good relationship with, keep it going. Yep. Why drop it? Yep. I got a LinkedIn the other day from a guy who had just retired from the Secret Service, who I don't think I knew him. But anytime anybody in the Secret Service asks to connect with me on LinkedIn, whether I know him or not, my answer is always yes. And he, in his message to me, because I accepted his, LinkedIn, and then he sent me a little note saying, "Thank you for always treating us Secret Service agents like we were gold." And that note meant more to me than almost anything I've ever received, as professional notes. Because he noticed that I noticed them. Mm-hmm. And I noticed them because I appreciated the job they were doing protecting my boss and keeping him safe. And I just loved the Secret Service. And anything I can do for them, I will. So the fact that this guy, who maybe if I saw him 20 years ago, I'd remember, recognize, I don't know. But the fact that he out of the blue sent me that note, that he saw the way I treated people, that's why you network. And it's not called networking. That's just why you're good to people. You're good to people because they deserve it. And then you just never know when you can help somebody in their career or in their life. That's how life should be. And by the way, I do the same thing for the military. Anytime anybody, anywhere, when I left the White House, I vowed that anytime anybody, anywhere in the military asked me to do anything, my answer is always yes. And so, I do a lot of fundraisers and help causes, and you don't need to, you'll never hear the word no. It's not
Well, I
networking.
certainly, I know
It's
you
just the
love
way it
me.
is.
Yeah, I definitely have been the benefactor of your help over the years, and definitely appreciate that for sure. And you've lived up to that, no doubt. I would like to ask a little bit about your time with President Bush. It's certainly a highlight that most people probably know you from, is that time in the White House, right? I mean, it's easy for me to think about 9/11, or I mean, maybe share a couple of your, best vignettes of your time with the president that you may want to share. That, I mean, they're probably in the book. I've read your books, so I mean, I think I know most stuff. But for the audience, what are some of the things that maybe are a little lesser known, or kind of just some things that you take away from your time being in that role with the president during a crazy, I mean, with 9/11 going on? That was just a seminal moment in the U.S. history.
My favorite story that defines who George Bush is. Um, One day at the briefing, I screwed up. I said something. I blamed something on Bill Clinton, which Bill Clinton, in my opinion, deserved the blame for. But President Bush's instructions to me and all White House staff were: look forward, never look backwards. We're here to solve problems, not blame with anybody else. So I got a question about the Second Intifada, the big rebellion in the West Bank of Israel. And I answered. The questioner was trying to blame all the violence on George Bush. And I pointed out the violence began in October 2000, before Bush was elected. So you can't blame it on Bush. It took place when President Clinton was in office. And it led to an AP headline that says, Bush blames Middle East violence on Clinton. And it turned into this little bit of a blow up. And the National Security Advisor told me I had to retract my words. And I said, no, I don't, because I knew they were true. And she said, yes, you do. I said, no, I don't. She said, yes, you do. After a couple of rounds like that, the National Security Advisor kind of outranks the press secretary. So I marched myself into the Oval Office, turned myself into the president, told him what I did. He wasn't happy about it. And I had to issue a statement retracting what I said. Big news story. It led the network news. It was an embarrassing day at the office for me. A pretty tough day. The next morning, I happened to be out of town because I had a previously accepted speech. But when you leave the Oval Office to get aboard Marine One, the president leaves first. He walks across the south lawn of the White House about 30 feet in front of the rest of the staff. We trail him, walk off camera. He goes onto the front door of Marine One. We go the back door of Marine One, and that's how you board. Well, when I got back to the White House after my speech, I heard that the president was looking for me to walk shoulder to shoulder with him aboard Air Force One. He knew that I was having a tough day, that retraction was tough to do. And he wanted to show the world I was his guy. And the press would criticize White House staff for George Bush for being loyal to Bush. We weren't loyal to him simply because he was our boss. We were loyal to him because he earned it. He earned it every day. And that is a perfect example of the type of guy he is. He demanded accountability. He was tough. He could be a towel snapper, a little kind of rowdy in that sense, but demanding, tough, but loyal to us. So we were loyal to him.
That's a great story. I had not heard that before either, and I love that. And it just shows. I think in the military, certainly, those are the leaders that you end up admiring, are the ones that take care of you, because we all make mistakes. I know I made a lot of mistakes in the military, and I am fortunate to have had leaders that could see past that and see the potential in you when you maybe even didn't think you had potential in you, So to have someone to believe in you and be there for you, it obviously makes you want to go and do the extra mile for them too. It goes both ways. The relationship goes both ways.
That's
I love
right.
that story from the president doing that when you're having a bad day. That's pretty awesome. No doubt. And then how long were you there with the President Bush? You didn't do both terms, right? You didn't
No.
You just did one run, three.
I,
How long were you there? Yeah.
I moved to Austin, Texas in the fall of 1999. So I worked for just over a year on the campaign.
Yep.
And then the transition into the White House. And I left in July of 2003. So I was at the White House for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And then with him, campaign-wise, just under 4, I guess.
Got it. And what was your, again, I'm very curious about your transition, because that's obviously high profile, but I'm sure high stress, a challenging place as much as it is an awesome opportunity. What was your decision calculus to decide to leave that behind and move into the civilian space? Because it's a pretty big pivot. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
you're doing it from a place where I would think there would be opportunities based on your connections and what you had been doing, but it's still it's a major life decision to make that call. And what was kind of going through
Mm.
your head at that time to and help you kind of frame that?
I told you earlier that I worked for Elizabeth Dole, and then when she dropped out, I thought I was done and I would head into the private sector. Well, when I met George Bush and you had that interview with him in Austin, I said to myself, this guy is such a good guy. I've got one more in me.
Hmm.
So I knew I wasn't going to be there, forever. After 21 years, it comes to a point where you say, I've had enough. I've done it. And I did not want to be a part of the reelection in 2004 because I was already feeling burnout. And I just didn't think I had another year and a half in me. So I got to that point in the summer of 2003, just a year before the next presidential election. And I said, this is probably the last off ramp. If I stay through the summer, I'm staying through 2024, the whole first
Mm-hmm.
term. And I was burning out and I knew
Yep.
it. And that's why you've got to measure yourself. You've got to know, are you still doing your job well? Are you still strong? Or are you burning out and resenting, not liking? And my burnout was really starting to reflect against reporters. And I was like, I can't believe the New York Times printed that. The Washington Post printed that. And as press secretary, especially back in that more polite era, you can't be like that.
Yeah.
My job as press secretary was get along with reporters. I had no choice. There was no alternative universe of reporters. There was just the mainstream reporters who sat in that briefing room. It was pre-internet, really. It was pre-social media, certainly. So that was it. That was the press pool. There's no
Yeah.
conservative outlets, no alternatives for me to work with. And I just knew the burnout was going to hit me. So I made the decision. It was time to go. The other factor is I'd gotten married about a year before that. And it was time for me to start a family and get on with those things in life too. So that helped.
And did you know what you wanted to do when you left the government space? Like, did you have an idea, or I mean, I just consulting is a nebulous thing. Maybe like, oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what a lot of people do. But like, did you know or have a plan for kind of what came next, or you just like, okay, now, all right, now what? Like, because in the military, they do try to help us. They want you to start thinking about transition a year before you do it, or 6 months at least. And not everyone does it to the same level, but there are at least programs in place for veterans that we can tap into for transitioning. I'm assuming there's not that for the press secretary. The president doesn't have a transition
No,
program to go through. I mean, so again, it's all self motivation in some ways, or just figuring out yourself. But how did you navigate that transition, and what good, bad things you wish you would have done differently? To get. I mean, obviously, you were been very successful, but I'm sure it was not an easy process.
my only plan was to sleep. That's. I was just looking forward to sleeping in and not being woken up by the sit room telling me something went boom somewhere in the night. Um, it's an unfair comparison, Beau, in that when you had my job as press secretary, when I told the president I was stepping down, I told him on a Friday. And then I spent the weekend. I called the vice president. I called the secretary of state, secretary of defense. I called top White House staff, hoping it wouldn't leak. And it leaked on Monday morning. And so by the time I walked into the briefing room, reporters were saying to me, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So, I got to place the world's biggest classified ad. On live TV, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll write a book. Maybe I'll give some speeches. Maybe I'll do some consulting. I have no idea. Literally, by the time I got back to my office, back then they had fax machines.
Yeah.
I had a book offer waiting for me on a fax machine.
Wow.
I had people calling, etc. So I got lucky, but I took it easy. I didn't want to start working yet. Like I said, I was newly married, and I was able to hit the speaking circuit. That was the one thing I really committed to, was giving speeches, and then I did write a book. And that's what I did for about the first year and a half, 2 years. And then I opened up my company. So I had an amazing soft landing, which kept me really hopping on the paid speech circuit and writing a book. And then I had to grow up and get a real job.
and for consulting, I mean, people, I mean, people hear consulting all the time. I think it's a very broad word for a lot of things that you can do as a consultant, right? And there's big firms, small firms, individuals doing it all the time. I mean, a lot of government, I mean, a lot of military folks get out and get into consulting, defense
Yeah.
contracting, consulting work. For you, what did you like over time figure out what you wanted to specialize in particular? That's something that,
Yeah.
or did it come to you, or did you pick a path? Kind of, I guess I'm kind of, was it kind of fall in your lap? Oh, yeah, somebody asked me to do that. Sounds pretty good. Or did you kind of know what kind of work you wanted to do in that space?
Yeah, I knew that I wanted to help corporations and sports organizations handle the
Yep.
press.
Yep.
That was my specialty. How do you handle reporters who are asking difficult questions? How do you think it through, get ready, give an answer, etc.? Deal then with all the incoming that you know that answer is going to make them ask another question. So um, the first client I had, interestingly, was courtesy. And this is again why you can't compare what I did to, in that sense, everybody's got their connections, and connections can help you with any job. So you can compare, but it was just the first guy who helped me get a job was President Bush's father.
Huh. Yeah.
He was playing golf with the CEO of IBM. CEO was an incoming new CEO, and he said he's looking for somebody to give him communications advice. And George Bush's father recommended me because I had just left. So that became my first client. My second client was Major League Baseball. They were going through the whole steroids crisis, and a contact I had introduced me to Bud Selig. And what really happened there was Bud got brought up to Congress to testify about steroids. Congress ripped him apart, chewed him up, spit him out, and he signed a contract with me by midnight that night. So I owe Congress that job, I suppose. Um, so, I had an idea, and then I had help because of the network I developed.
Yeah.
But my network would have been useless if people who were going to hire me didn't see something in me.
Sure.
So for anybody who thinks I can help, I've got military expertise, I've got skills. Your first question is, what can I do to help somebody else? Be real about it, be concrete about it, and you've got to be the bottom line voice of reason and saying, all right, I know these people and I know I can help somebody do this, but will they sign a contract? Will they hire me? And that's where you got to make the real careful distinction between, all right, I know 100 people. I got 100 good contacts. How many of those will lead to an actual signing of something or a job? And that's why it's there. I'll give you a baseball analogy. Well, you better have a lot of at-bats.
Yeah.
Because you're only going to hit, if you hit 250, you're doing great. Not every contact, not everything you do turns into something, but you better step up to the plate. Otherwise, you're hitting zero.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you miss every shot you don't take, right? So you got to keep shooting the shots out there, whatever it may be, because you never know which one is going to hit and what that's going to lead to. And
Right?
again, it's all about that network, I think, in so many ways. And again, I think for it, in that space too, again, your trajectory or your career path is different than most, obviously, but still, you're selling yourself in so many ways, right? You're selling. I mean, you've been successful in high pressure profile roles. You have an opportunity, and again, one opportunity leads to more if you do a good job there, obviously as well, and you build that resume, so to speak, over time. I mean, I know you've done a lot in the sports space since then. And is that a conscious decision to kind of
Oh,
become?
yeah.
I know you're a long suffering Dolphins fan. It's got to be tough anyway, but I mean, I know you're a sports guy. Is that something that you said, okay, yeah, I want to do what I like this Major League Baseball thing. I want to do more of that. Is that something that accidentally happened, or was something you really wanted to focus on?
Well, literally, when I did that briefing where I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, one of the messages I got was from a guy at IMG, the gigantic sports agency, a
Yeah.
guy named Sandy Montag. I didn't know who Sandy was, but I knew what IMG was. So Sandy called me and said, he left a message saying, I think I can help Ari with his post-White House career. So I returned his call. I didn't know Sandy from a box of sand. And Sandy was the one who said to me, sports organizations need a lot of help when the news leaps off the sports page and onto the front page. And a light bulb just went off over my head. As soon as Sandy said that, I was like, I'm in. Yeah, I want to help anybody in sports whose news is no longer, he went 3 for 4, he scored 2 touchdowns. There's an issue, there's a problem, something happened. I want to help those people deal with it. And so Sandy, who knew everybody in sports, became my business partner. And so Sandy was able to successfully introduce me to a huge number of people in sports, and that launched the whole sports side of what I do.
God, is that still your primary? I should know these things probably. Is it your main focus still sports related, or is it a much
It
more of a,
varies.
yeah, yeah.
Sometimes it's 50-50, 50% corporate, 50% sports. Right now, it's probably a little closer to 80% corporate, 20% sports. I helped launch Live Golf. I worked for the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. So I go to all the CFP selection committee meetings. So if you're a Notre Dame fan, you probably stop watching. Um, the,
God,
the, the, you know, the world of sports kind of reminds me of politics. Politics had voters, sports has fans, and they're both really noisy. And they both have reporters who dig in. So I love working in sports. It's fun. It's not like my old job where things are real serious, but people take it seriously, and that's what I love.
that's awesome. What would you and what advice would you give to someone that wanted to get into the consulting world? I mean, is there a traditional path to do it? Is it often from I assume a lot of people maybe transition over from politics into that space or back and forth, but is there like what is the traditional career look like in that space? If there is one, maybe there's not.
Well, I think you've got to be very specific about what it is you can offer.
Yeah.
Don't just say, I've got so much experience, I'm a problem solver, and I was involved in all these complicated missions or things, and therefore I can help people solve their problems. That is so generic, it doesn't speak to anybody. So what you've got to do is go in and say, I know, whatever, maybe I know communications. I know when reporters are calling you, how to get you through that crisis that a reporter is about to put you through. Uh, or, I know logistics. I know how to move something from point A to point B to point C to point D when X, Y, and Z are going to go wrong. I will get that from A to D. Know what your specialty is, know what your skills are, be specific about it, and then target industries or people who have those needs that match your logistics or your skills, in that case, logistics. Um, Obviously, Bo, the advantage the military has that everybody wants to hire somebody who's got a background where they're on time, they know how to get a job done, they don't backtalk, and you can just rely on them.
Yeah.
That is a skill that doesn't matter what field you're in. That's why military people have an edge, an advantage in whatever they're going to do. But even with those great abilities, you better have something concrete too that you can deliver in terms of what it is you would consult about if you want to get into consulting. Obviously, going into finance, that world, you have to have a little bit of financial training, background, knowledge. But I'm so glad our military gets this head start because they've earned it. They've proved it by having a good career in the military. I was actually at an airport bar the other week in Minneapolis, and the bartender, it was crazy. There were so many people in there. The place was short-staffed. The bartender's running around, serving drinks, taking orders from people at the tables. He was unflappable. I mean, people are yelling. I've been sitting here for 10 minutes. The guy would just take care of everybody, cool, calm as could be, called everybody sir. I was sitting at the bar, and so I caught his eye. I said, "Are you ex-military?" He was. He's a paratrooper, served from '01 to '05. And I could just tell, just because of the cool, calm, collected way he was dealing with all this mayhem. And, then we started talking a little bit. I probably made him late for a few other tables because I wanted to hear his story. And military deserves these good advantages because they get you through stuff. They know.
Yeah. No, it's such good points you talk about, and I talk about that a lot. Transitioning veterans and companies that want to hire veterans. What can a veteran bring to the table? Part of it is that grit, right? That you're used to getting punched in the face and keeping on going. You're not gonna
Mm-hmm.
quit, right? When things are the hardest, you're still gonna grind through it and be able to show up on time and be there, which is not something you can say for everyone, for sure. So that's a huge piece of it. But I think your other advice is spot on too, because I do get a lot of veterans say, "Oh, I'm comfortable in chaos." I'm like, "That's great, but there has to be some type of, and I can deliver X, Y, and Z."
Right.
It's the what can you deliver piece that I think people don't refine very well sometimes and get frustrated as a veteran. It's like, well, why don't I get hired? Well, if you think you can do everything, you can probably do nothing. Like, be a
Right.
little more specific on, hey, I'm really good, to your point, at logistics or IT or tech or explosives, whatever it is, something, to be that expert that where you are a mile deep. Being a mile wide is great, but there's something at some point you have to be the expert in something. I think if you're gonna sell it to somebody, you better be the expert in it. I guess at some point.
Well, the other piece I'd say that is available to veterans today that wasn't available to me when I was, you had to go to a print shop and print a resume.
Yeah,
Took a week,
yeah,
and once it was set, it was kind of set. You can specialize your resume now to whoever it is you're applying for. So if you're in the military, you're a veteran, and you've got 5 distinct skills, and the 5 skills speak to different companies, tailor your resume. So you're talking to company A, just show on your resume, emphasize skill A's. You're applying to company B, different type of corporation.
yep,
Put on your resume the skills you have that are specific to company B. You can do that now, and you're being direct, you're being honest, but it's kind of, you got to market yourself.
yeah,
And like you point out, Bo, you can't say, well, I'm good at everything.
yeah.
You got to see it through the eyes of the employer who says, I need this. I don't necessarily need that. So market yourself for this.
Yeah, and and I think the challenge so many veterans also have is in it. I talked a little bit about with you. It's that because you are used to having a detailer, a monitor that kind of tracked your career to get to leave the service, and then all of a sudden, like, you're in charge of it yourself. It can be scary. I mean, because you have to be the one that's going out there and pushing for it and making those decisions instead of someone telling you what to do. You have to do it yourself. Now you can do it. It's just a different mindset. You have to own your career a lot more on the civilian side than you do in the corporate, in the government side, right? So I think that's something that just takes a little bit of a leap for veterans to get used to. Like, yeah, nobody's coming 6 months from now, even if or even if I work really hard in this job, they may not really notice me and promote me. You have to understand the way things work, where to engage, where to inject yourself, and not just doing the hard work doesn't always get you promoted like it might in the military. It's a little different. It's just, I think it's just you have to understand what you're dealing with.
No,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. That's very good advice.
Well, hey, I really love talking to you today. It's such a pleasure for me to catch up, and I know we don't do it often enough. But any as we kind of wrap up, any thoughts you have? I mean, again, your experience and your support of veterans through all your career has been awesome. Anything you want to share with this group today that you're doing now, that you're going to be doing in the future that may be of value for our veteran listeners?
Well, I just think the thing I just need to say is just gratitude. It is gratitude for people who served our country. It's gratitude for people who entered the military, a volunteer service. And what I learned at the White House is some of the best people I ever met in my life were people in the military. On September 11th, pretty much every single person around the president, from the Secret Service to the military to the top White House staff, but the military was like this. No emotion on the most emotional day you can imagine in America, because people had a job to do. They had a mission, and that mission was under stress. And that's where I always admired the military, but watching them in action on that day and then the days following, just endless admiration and gratitude for the military. So it's not about me or where I'm going or what's next for me. It really is about, I'm proud of you, Beau, for helping out veterans, for doing everything you've done in your career since you left the Marine Corps to help veterans in their path. And you're doing a great job of it, and you're serving still by helping the military. And if this talk does any good for anybody, I'll be happy. But I really appreciate what you're doing.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for the time. stay safe out there, and hopefully our paths cross really soon. And again, I really do appreciate all the support you've given me personally, and to so many veterans and Secret Service members over the years. It's something that again means a lot to me. So thanks, Ari. Appreciate the time out here, man.
Thank you, Beau.